Hello, everybody. It is Stories Live. We are now on our new Friday schedule. So, we're going to be doing the third Friday of the month at 7 p.m. Mountain. So, that's why we're here on the 17th. So, tonight I have KB Jensen, Jessica Hopkins, and Jeffy Kennedy. So that's the order everybody's going to be reading in. And the theme for this evening is Love Kills, in honor of Valentine's Day. So I'm very excited to see what these ladies have in store. So, first up, we've got KB Jensen. Hello.
Hi, thanks for having me today.
Absolutely. Yeah, and we were talking earlier about your poster back there of your book cover, so that's pretty cool.
Thanks. Yeah, it's gigantic. I have two of them actually. Lord help me.
Oh my goodness. All right, nice. Well, what are you reading for us tonight? You promised it's demented.
It's extremely demented. I have three stories for you. They're all demented. The first one is especially demented. It's actually from my second book, not the latest. So, um,
Oh.
yeah, you'll have some fun hearing something different because I've usually been reading from Love and Other Monsters in the Dark when I visited this lovely show. So yeah.
All right, awesome. Well, I will let you take it away here.
Okay. Let's see, did my bookmark disappear? Just one second here. Good thing I have this book memorized. This story is called Fatal Flaw, and it's a little bit between PG-13 and rated R, so just heads up on that. Fatal Flaw. She was by no means a perfect woman. There was a reason she was still single. One of her worst flaws started when she was about 3 years old, the first time she saw her father hit her mother. Every time he hit her, she bit her nails down to the quick. She even bit her cuticles, spitting out the skin and nails. The fighting and the nail biting continued through the bulk of her childhood. Her nails were ragged, jagged, and flimsy. They got caught on things, tore, and bled. She didn't want to be like her mother, begging a bad man to change. When she grew up, she was going to find the perfect man. She quit biting her nails in seventh grade, coincidentally, when her father disappeared. She decided she was too old for nail biting, and she just stopped. The decision probably had something to do with a growing attraction to boys, but she still had this habit of putting her fingers in her mouth, an oral fixation. It gave the white tips a thin, washed out look, almost clear, and the ridges never went away, no matter how much buffing she did. She painted them for years to keep them out of her mouth. She used 100 different colors, but it never worked. So it had been about 17 years since she bit them, and yet she found herself sucking in the tips, waiting in the coffee shop for the man of her dreams. She liked his profile online. There was something funny about it. He liked all the same authors, read the right books, listened to the same kind of music. They even shared the same alma mater, although they'd never met at Yale. They emailed back and forth, and she asked him about his GPA. It was the same as hers, 3.89. What a coincidence. She had answered all the right questions in all the right ways on the questionnaire, and the computer algorithms had paired them. It made her wonder, if you put all the right criteria in a website, can it manufacture the man of your dreams, like one of those 3D printers that spew out children's toys and realistic sculptures? She had gone through her own manufacturing process, had gone through the usual rituals to prepare. She spent the night before their first date reading about how to catch the perfect man. She had hoisted herself up into a push up bra, wiggled into a tight dress, lotioned every inch of her skin, painted her face to perfection, and spent half an hour and half a bottle of mousse fighting off a bad hair day with her industrial strength hairdryer and curling iron. She had even issued a little prayer while she was doing her hair. Dear God, please let my hair be good today, she had shouted. She was excited and nervous. One of her friends had called her that morning. You never know what a person is really like when you meet them online, her friend had said. Be careful, Minnie. I'm meeting him at a coffee shop. It's perfectly safe, Minnie said. Still, you don't know what his intentions are. Be careful. He should be careful. He doesn't know what my intentions are either, Minnie said, laughing. I'm glad you're meeting him in public. He could be a serial killer or something. Internet dating is perfectly normal these days, Minnie said with a sigh. God, you're old fashioned, Liz. A lot of people get married this way, you know. Not that I'm in a rush to get married. You wouldn't mind it, Liz said. A few hours later, Minnie found herself in the coffee shop about to embark on a typical 21st century date. Daytime TV was blasting in the corner, clapping and cheering as a man walked in the door. Her heart leapt up as she sprang to her feet. Mike, she said hopefully. Minnie, he said. He came up to her and kissed her on the cheek. Her first impression was positive. He met all the criteria she had listed on stellarmatch.com. About 6 feet, check. Tan, check. Nice smile with good teeth, check. Hypnotic green eyes, check. He actually looked like his profile picture, and all the right boxes were still checked, just like the form she had filled out. He was made to order, one highly selective match. You have to love technology, she thought. Do you want anything? He asked, wallet in hand, as he stood by the counter to order. No, thanks. I already have my mocha, she said, grinning back at him. Once he got his cappuccino, he sat down across from her and stretched out his legs in front of him, tapping one foot uneasily on the ground. What's your fatal flaw? She wondered. What could it be? You look too perfect to be single. Hell, so do I. And so she asked him, what's your worst habit? He smiled at her. Is this a job interview? He asked. Because if it is, then I'm supposed to pretend a strength is a flaw. Say something like, I work too hard. She laughed, but her mouth formed a small pout. You haven't answered the question, she said. Why do we have to start out with bad habits anyway? He said gently. Let's start off on the right foot, why don't we? Isn't it strange we have so much in common? Minnie said. It's almost too good to be true. What's your favorite movie? He asked. Oh, I don't know. I like the scary ones, she said. Your favorite, then. You're going to think I'm a freak, she said. Silence of the Lambs. Huh, he said, leaning back and stretching his hands out behind his head in a relaxed pose. I like that one too. Classic. I saw it when I was a kid and it scared the hell out of me, especially that scene where Hannibal Lecter chews off the guard's face. I found it scary too, she said, but I'm pretty good at handling scary stuff. So you're not the kind of girl who would dig her nails into my arm during a slasher scene then? He said, shifting on the seat. Interesting. Maybe we should go see a scary movie sometime and you can find out, she said, crossing her legs. Nylon brushed against nylon. How about now? He asked. There's a theater down the street. We can walk, she said, sipping the last of her mocha and setting down the cup. Ceramic clinked against ceramic a little too loudly. Her hands were shaking out of excited nervousness. You look like such an ideal man, she said. How are you still single? And you look like the ideal woman. How are you still single? He asked, laughing. They put their empty cups on the counter and he held the door. As they left the little cafe, he had his arm in hers as they walked slowly down the street. She was tottering on 3-inch heels, unused to wearing them. I'm a bit picky, she said. When I find something about a man I don't like, I tend to dispose of him pretty quickly. That's why I like to ask up front about bad habits. Doesn't that scare them off? He asked. The ones worth having tend to stick around, she said, pulling him closer to her. She liked the way he smelled. So I gotta ask you again, what's your fatal flaw? She purred. You've got to have one. Maybe I don't have one, he said. Maybe I'm a man without fault. Is there such a thing? She said, laughing. I'll tell you mine if you tell me yours, he said. I don't know. Maybe we should have a little fun before we get to all that. She grabbed his hand and swung his arm, practically skipping to the box office. They sat through the slasher movie, sat through the bullets and the blood and the gore. They sat through the fire and the explosions, and she didn't jump once. She held his arm but didn't flinch. He didn't flinch either. As they walked out of the movie, she caught his glance follow the behind of the girl in front of him. She didn't like it. That's it, right there, she thought, staring at the girl's short shorts. He's a cheating bastard, isn't he? Just like the last one. Where to next? He asked. Shall I walk you back to your car? Yes, she said, winding the red scarf around her neck. How about we take the riverfront trail back? She said. I'm not in a huge rush, are you? Not at all, he said, raising his eyebrows. Such a charming downtown area, she said. I love the old-fashioned streetlights. He was encased in a yellow halo of light. Rows of 1920s buildings surrounded them, only a couple stories tall, with arches over every window that made it seem like the old buildings had eyes and eyebrows. They seemed to have their own souls when you looked at them for a while. So, why do you like slasher movies so much? She asked. I don't know. I guess I just like cheap thrills. I usually like something a little more cerebral, she said. I know what you mean, he said. She was playing with the tassels on her scarf and winding it through her fingers. What else do we have in common? She asked. I don't know, he said. You have any pets? Me and pets don't get along, she said. I used to chase my parents' cat around the house with a fork. That reminds me of the children's story where the wild things are. The little boy chases the dog around with a fork. I used to love that story. Me too, she said. That's where I got the idea. God, that's eerie you picked up on that. They were both children of the 80s, that was for sure, she thought. I'm pretty familiar with the story. My mom used to call me a wild thing and lock me in my room for hours, he said. All I had to do was read books by myself. That sounds sad. I'm sorry. She wasn't a very nice woman, he said. I'm still angry. I don't know why I'm telling you all this anyway. They had walked down the steps and were on the trail now. The sun was long gone, and the river was a dark gray silver twinkling under the lamplights. She liked the way the light reflected on the churning river snaking next to them. There was something elegant about it, so close and so deadly. The water had claimed 3 lives within the last year. It made her shudder to think of it. Boulders lined the path, and she pulled him closer to the concrete edge, the rail. So, you still want to know my secret? She said. Why I'm still single? Your fatal flaw, as you call it, he said. I'll tell you mine if you tell me yours. He reached for the end of her scarf, and she gave it a little tug to release it from his grasp. Oh, so you like scarves, do you? She asked. He wound the scarf around her neck and unwound it in a toying gesture. She gripped at it and pulled it away from his fingers. Not so fast, mister, she said. It's my turn. She ran the scarf around his neck. You ever heard of autoerotic asphyxiation? She asked. The comment usually bought her some time. That's very dangerous, he said. Do you like that kind of thing? She asked, pulling the scarf tighter around his neck and standing behind him. I'm not into strangling, he said hoarsely, pulling the fabric from his neck. That was when he pulled the knife out of his pocket, flipped it open, and thrust it out behind him, at her. Minnie leapt back and laughed and laughed when she saw it. It was a funny thing to bring on a first date. His face flushed red and like she had somehow emasculated him. What's so funny? He asked. Nothing, she said. I'm very scared. Then why are you fucking giggling? I could kill you. It was then that she pulled out the handgun from her pocket. Not if I kill you first. I've never had this happen before on a date, he said. Neither have I, she said. I keep thinking that the computer algorithms have gotten awfully advanced. Everyone always jokes about an online date with a serial killer. Her gun was still pointed at him. Can you guess why I'm still single? She said. You like to kill men, he said. And you like to kill women, don't you? He coughed and nodded. Tell me, when two serial killers go on a date, is it a perfect match or does it end with bullets and bloodshed? I don't know, he said. Maybe if you put down your gun and I put down my knife, we could give it a try. He threw his knife into the river with a gulp and eyed her gun. Forgive me if I hold on to this for a while, she said, slipping it into her right pocket. You are a bit bigger than me. How are we supposed to trust each other? He asked. I don't know. Maybe that's part of the thrill, she said, taking his hand. The two of them walked along the river bank. They should really rename that website. Stellarmatch.com doesn't cut it. It should be killermatch.com, she said, laughing. Who knows, she thought. Maybe he was marriage material after all. Tell me about your first time, she said. Her name was Melissa Jones, he said dreamily. Not that type of first time, she said. Your first kill. She was excited to meet someone she had so much in common with. It was one and the same. he said. Melissa's parents died in a car accident a few years before I met her, and she wanted to be with them, but she was too scared of death to do it alone. She was my first love, and one night I told her I'd do anything for her. Anything, she said. Anything, I said, and she told me that I could make love to her if I promised to slit her wrists afterward. So I did. I spent my first time thinking about how this was the last time I was going to kiss her lips, her breasts, press my thighs against hers. Too much detail, Minnie said. Anyway, I didn't know how I was going to do it, but she made it so easy. She took some pills and held out the knife in one hand. I took the knife, kept it pressed in her fingers, and cut along the vein. I watched as the blood left her body and her face faded into a soft violet shade of pale I had never seen before. I didn't cry because she was smiling. She was happy to be with them again. That's almost sweet, Minnie said. I do it out of love, you know, he said. I'm a collector of hearts, beating and broken. I like to put women out of their misery. That's my type. The way I look at it, it's an act of kindness, really. I'll be whatever you want for a night, be your dream man, and then I end it without any tears. Love heals all wounds, and I love for one night. That's sick and twisted, she said, but I can relate. A lot of people love for one night, but a lot less finality, he said. Why leave a woman the next day? Think about it. She never has to wake up alone again. No more rejection. She gets to live forever, entombed in my glorious basement, her heart in a jar. I don't want your type of kindness, she said, gritting her teeth slightly. So you didn't go to Yale. That makes you a liar. I like to kill flawed men, especially cheaters. That's my pathology. Are you a cheater? Are you? Nope, he said. Never been in a relationship long enough to cheat. How do you end up with so many cheating men? I attract the wrong type, I guess, she said with a sigh. I'm tired of killing men. I wish I could just find one worthy of keeping alive. Maybe you like the wrong type. If you're tired, maybe I've got a solution for you, he said. That would be death, of course, he said, laughing. I'm not feeling particularly suicidal, but thank you, Dr. Kevorkian. She laughed and squeezed his hand. I'd rather just find the perfect man. They were back in the parking lot, and she unlocked her car. Are you going to give me the axe, or let me come home with you and stay the night? He asked. She couldn't help but giggle as she leaned against the car door. Maybe both. She whispered her address into his ear and kissed him, biting his lower lip. For a moment she wondered if she had finally found the perfect man. If not, well, there was a hatchet under her pillow. It would be there waiting for him, with a red ribbon tied around its wooden handle. That was story number one. Now that you're all super creeped out, I'll go on to the next story. Um, so, this one's for the writers. Um, it's called Red Dedication. I met Nate 5 years ago at a writer's workshop at the public library. That should have been a red flag. All writers are crazy, you know. What drives a writer to spend hours a day staring at a blank page and filling it with characters, letters, words, monstrous dreams? Usually some kind of flirtation with insanity. A disconnect from reality? I should know. He asked me if I wanted to grab coffee, and we could write for a while too. It seemed innocent enough, but like an artist, he used me as his muse. He started writing a character named Delilah, who looked like me, blonde, green-eyed, with round, pert breasts and muted makeup other than red lipstick. Her favorite color was red, like mine. Red sweaters, red dresses. She sobbed, listening to the same songs through her earbuds, even in public. Loved to write in coffee shops and had bad choice in men. That part was actually pretty cliche, but unfortunately for me, true. We were like kindred spirits. At the time, I thought twin souls. He never asked me out. He never let me read his whole novel either. It's not ready, he'd say. I'm not ready. He'd look down at his hands. It took years for him to create, just snippets, tiny pieces of the life he created, a life that oddly mirrored my own. Then he took years querying agents until one day he told me it was going to be published. We celebrated by writing at our coffee shop, typing on laptops next to each other for hours. More years passed. He griped about the editing process in a soft spoken way, said he didn't want to stray from his vision of who Delilah was, but there was so much pressure to make her something different. I couldn't do anything about it, he said. I gave up my creative control when I signed the contract. Editors, he shrugged. Even so, I felt a pang of jealousy when he talked about his publisher, for I had yet to finish my pirate fantasy novels, the series that stretched from one century to another. When his book came out, I looked for my name in the acknowledgments and didn't find it. But he did sign me a copy. At his book launch, I held the paperback in my hands and waited in line like everyone else. My writing buddy, my friend, was a success. I wasn't particularly bitter. Eagerly, I took the book home and started reading about Delilah in bed. The stalking was creepy, but it was the assault that made me gag. I wanted to see the way he handled her, to see what happened next. It's not me, I told myself, but it was. I could feel the cloth wadded up in my mouth and Delilah's heart pounding in my ears. In the end, I could feel the sting of the knife against her throat, cold and sharp. The police weren't coming. It was up for her to fight back, and she couldn't do it. Tears streamed down my face as the knife cut deeper into my flesh. Reaching up, I felt the blood, slippery crimson, streaking through my hands. Because I was Delilah, and Nate was a killer, not just a writer. He had control over life and death in the world he created. I dropped the book, my hands shaking, and reminded myself it wasn't real, that I was being crazy, like all writers are crazy. I couldn't finish reading the pages. Was he a writer or a magician? Because I know I felt that knife against my throat. The next day, Nate sent me a text asking me how I liked the book. I didn't answer. And the next time he asked me to meet up at a coffee shop, I didn't come. I did not want to be written into any more of his stories, thinly veiled or otherwise, or die in his pages again. But it was curiosity that made me pick up the phone when he called in the end. Did you see I dedicated the book to you? He asked. Did that weird you out? You killed me, I said. I'm a human being, not material. The editor wanted that to happen, not me. I had no control, he said. You're spineless, Nate, and messed up. It wasn't about you. It wasn't you. Oh, so now you deny it. Forgive me. I'll buy you a coffee. I wavered. I wavered because he was my friend. I wavered because there was a murderous edge to his voice. I got another one from Love and Other Monsters in the Dark. A lot of stuff happening online in these stories lately. So yeah. This one's called Catfishing in the Time of COVID. It's from a few years back, obviously. When I was 5, I caught a catfish. When I was 50, I was a catfish. I toyed with a man named Marty on Facebook, a recent divorcee. Do you remember me? I asked him on Messenger. We used to be friends in 4th grade. You were my first crush. Men always respond to flattery. I was pretending to be a woman named Susan. Usually they go for younger women, but sometimes I like a challenge. Susan had somehow kept her figure. She was a 60-year-old widow in her fake profile, of course. In real life, she was happily married with 3 grown boys. I get curious, so I know these things. Susan had a long list of achievements in my version of reality. She was a retired RN and volunteered with Habitat for Humanity. There was a picture of her on a mission trip, surrounded by little brown children, a picture with little hearts in the edges. Another of her holding a hammer building house. She had memes, so many memes, religious memes to show what a good person she was. God is good, God is great, God is the answer. You could trust Susan. Do you remember Mrs. Flanagan? Marty pinged back on Messenger. She was a great teacher. How I loved the sound of a sucker, the sound of a messenger ding. Mrs. Flanagan had some good stories, I typed back. Yeah, she did, Marty wrote. I miss the playground, I said. What's your life like now? Well, with the pandemic, it's pretty lonely, to be honest. Wish I was there, I wrote back. Me too, Marty said. Do you know the worst thing about this whole situation? What? I asked. The lack of human contact, he wrote. I miss it. Me too. I shivered, pulling my blanket up over me as I lay in bed with my laptop, the light glowing on my hands in the dark room with drawn, blackout curtains. I had stopped bothering opening them. My studio apartment had started to feel like a prison. The big bed in the middle floated like an island in the middle of a shrinking sea. With the pandemic, my world was getting smaller every day. We could Zoom, he typed. I get zoomed out, I wrote back. But I could talk on the phone. I gave Marty a number he could call, and we talked on the phone for hours. Even though he was 10 years older than me, he had a warm, rich voice. Can you fall for your own victim? What if he was another catfish? That seemed unimaginable. There was something honest and kind about him. Now I wondered if I could love him, if I had met him in real life, under normal circumstances. I looked at his pictures and wondered what he smelled like. I looked at the tousled black hair streaked with gray and the deep brown eyes. I wondered what it would be like to gaze into them. He had a serious look to him. In a strange way, Marty made my world feel bigger. Do you think we should meet sometime? The idea terrified me, and not just because he'd find me out. It terrified me the way the possibility of love terrifies any sane person. Oh, Marty, I said softly, you know it's not a good idea right now. We live in different cities. Travel isn't safe at the moment, and I've been thinking of coming out of early retirement and helping out at the hospital. I know, he said. I meant one day. One day, yes. The lies spilled out of my mouth so easily. I had a talent for them, and I hated myself for each one I told. I hated myself for each and every one. I knew I had to ask him for money soon. Money, that's what this was about, right? Not my own profound loneliness, not trying to fill it. I found myself looking forward to his calls. We talked every evening for hours. We often talked about mundane things like the weather. I have trouble sleeping, I told him. I wake up in the middle of the night and I can't fall back asleep. That's pandemic stress for you, he said. I feel that too. In the afternoon, he'd tell me about the clouds above his house or the birds in his yard out in the country. He had books that named them. We never talked about COVID or our supposedly shared hometown. We talked about dreams and what they meant. What's your vision for 2021? He asked, assuming you're vaccinated. I want to travel, I told him. I want to see the world. I want to go to France and write a book in the countryside. I don't know why I told him the truth that day, but then again, it wasn't the first time. After all these months alone in the dark room, I wondered what it would be like if Marty were there with me in that bed, with his arms around me. What it would feel like to be held, to feel Marty's lips pressed against my hair, his chest against my face. I laughed out loud, a bitter laugh. Marty, do you think we'll ever find love again? I asked him during one of our calls. We have to have faith, he said, that things will get better, and we have to learn to see the love that we already have. I stood up and opened the curtains. I looked out at the street below, at the birds flitting back and forth. How do you tell the difference between a sparrow and a swallow? Is there a difference? I asked him. Does it really matter? He had said. I wondered if there was that much of a difference between Susan and me, a swallow and a sparrow. Of course there was. As he listed off details I quickly forgot, I realized I had earned enough of his trust, and that I had told him too much. Some of the stories were real and mine. I told him about the bicycle accident I'd had when I was 9. I'd pedaled down a steep, grass-covered hill as fast as I could and hit a hole in the ground at the bottom. I flew through the air, and when I landed, I was completely fine until the bike fell on top of me, giving me a bloody nose. I kind of felt like that now. I stopped contacting him for a few days, enough days that he started to worry. He sent messages asking if I was okay. I pray you're all right, he wrote. I lay in bed, not eating, not sleeping, shivering, neither ill nor well, knowing that I was a horrible person, wishing I could call him and tell him how awful I was, confess all my sins. Instead, finally, I sent the message saying I had gotten in trouble, that I needed money for bail. I asked for a wire transfer. The nice thing about catfishing is you can work from home. It's convenient during a pandemic. The bad thing about it is having to say goodbye and the psychological toll that entails. It's a specific skill set. You've either got it or you don't. I was losing it. I knew it was time for a new career, time for a change. I was surprised when the wire transfer came through. To this day, I don't understand why he did it. Marty sent 20 grand along with the message. To whoever you are, I sincerely hope you enjoy writing in France. Take care and God bless. Marty. P.S. My fourth grade teacher's name was Mrs. Johnson, not Mrs. Flanagan. So,
Well, so yeah, I don't think I'm going to, go back into the online dating pool ever again after this. I think I'm just going to be single forever. But anyway, those were all good stories. So thank you so much, KB.
thanks for having me, Amy.
All right. So next up, we have Jessica. Hello.
Hello.
How are you doing?
Doing all right. How are you?
I am doing pretty well. It's Friday night, so that's a happy thing. And you have something that you just finished working on, I think, or
Yep, this week.
awesome. Yeah, well, that's so cool. And yeah, can you share a little bit about the
Sure.
story?
So it's a horror story based on indigenous folklore. So it's a piece of folklore that's pretty prevalent throughout the southeastern nations and other nations as well. So yeah, and like I said, I just finished it this week, so it's brand spanking new.
All right, awesome. Well, I will leave you to it.
All right. So this is called Couture. Have you ever met a god? I have. I see her reflection in my eyes. Everyone has always told me my eyes are unusual. They're a deep forest green, the kind where the trees swallow sunlight, the kind that has a mossy uneasiness where every snapped twig makes you jump, the kind that reminds you just how young your species really is and how very, very old the earth is. Yeah, they're unusual. One of my best traits, I think, keeps people's attention. Well, I don't mean people. I mean men. Men have vexed me for as long as I can remember. They are liars and drunks, cheaters and conmen, abusers all. Oh, sure, there are the good, honest ones that know how sacred a woman is. But I never meet those kind. I know they're bad, but I just can't stay away. Every Friday and Saturday night, I curl my hair and put on clothes designed to lure men in. My look is never complete without my red lipstick and favorite black boots. Some might think they're tacky, but they really speak to me. Tonight is Friday, but sometimes I go out during the week too. Other times I just pick up and leave town, hitchhiking my way to some other down low spot. Smoke doesn't hang heavy in the air anymore, not since they outlawed smoking in buildings, but that's only the legal places. The ones south of the law, well, there's hardly any rules there. I like those places best. Time is biting its way into 8 o'clock, and I need to get a move on. I've been in this town 2 months, pushing 3. It's a bit of a record for me. It's a dried up well of a town in central Oklahoma, where paint peels from houses and there's a stray dog or two waiting for scraps at the only diner. A few doors down from that diner is Rusty's, the bar. There's a direct relationship with how hard scrabble a place is and how many patrons the bar hosts on any given night. Rusty's is always fit to bursting. I finish getting ready and make the short trip from my motel room to the bar, checking my hair and the self-facing camera of my phone before pulling open the door. The smell of stale beer and boiled peanuts swims over me, as familiar now as a persistent pebble in my shoe. I sidle up to the bar and flick my eyes from face to face. The men look at me, too. They always look. Back again, says Joe, the Muskogee bartender. He's wiping a glass dry and wearing that easy smile of his, crow's feet gathering at the corners of his coal-black eyes. I smile in return. It's your charm. I just can't stay away, I say, and he pours me a drink. I drink the same thing every night, and Joe pays attention. He doesn't know his sadness crowds his eyes like those crow's feet. He doesn't know that I can read him like a magazine. You know, I never caught your name. He rests his hands on the bar and leans on them, the towel draped on his shoulder. I never threw it. I smile coyly over the rim of my glass. It's genuine amusement on my part. Joe isn't the kind of man I'm looking for. He chuckles. Lady of mystery, all right, I got you. Well, anyway, I figured I'd let you know about a round dance tonight at the high school. Concern drops a shadow over his eyes. Probably a better crowd of people than here. I'm just fine here. Before he can say anything else, a man wearing a dented cowboy hat and a faded Harley Davidson shirt bellies up to the bar next to me. He smells of Old Spice and cheap whiskey and hasn't shaved in a few days. The grin he gives me is more of a leer. Hello, darling, he says. Joe eyes him with a small shake of his head and then walks away. I angle myself to face this newcomer. Hello yourself. And who might you be? I purr. He thinks he's a wolf. He has no idea who is predator and who is prey. I'm Bud. I've been watching you. Oh, I bet you have. His eyes rake over me again and pause on my boots. Those are some interesting shoes. I point a toe. Do you like them? They're couture. What's that mean? It means they're unique, Bud. Like me. He looks at the boots again, at the mottled hoof-like texture of the bottom, the way there seems to be no heel. If only he could see the tracks they make. It takes no time for Bud to get me out to his truck. It's dented and a blue so faded it's almost pastel. Bud belches as he opens the passenger door for me. What a gentleman. Let's take a drive, I say. Anything you want, darling. He struggles a bit getting behind the wheel, and he probably shouldn't be driving. Water under the bridge. I direct him to a spot near a small river, the huge canopy of live oaks making a pocket of darkness in the moonlit night. He cuts the engine, and I peel out of my jacket, tossing it on the dash. Bud hiccups and gives me a dopey, drunken grin. In the next minute, he's on top of me, pushing me into a half-lying position against the door. He paws at my bare arms and stomach, apparently trying to figure out the best way to get my tank top off. Bud didn't win any genius awards. He kisses me sloppily and finally gets a hand under my shirt. Grunting, he pulls it off and begins to grope my breasts. Hey, Bud, I say sweetly. He pulls back a bit. Yeah? You never told me what you did to Tracy. He stiffens and anger ripples through him. I didn't do nothing to that. Wait a second. How do you know about Tracy? His eyes narrow. I never mentioned her. I favor him with a honeyed smile. Oh, I know lots of things. I know who you were before you ever came over. The gears are turning in Bud's head, blunted by alcohol and his own innate dullness, and he stares at me as if just now realizing there might be something off about this situation. I slide my hands up and down his chest. The Harley Davidson t-shirt bunches between my fingers. I'm counting his ribs. You're bad news, Bud, I say, as sweet as ever. Now, when this next part happens, I want you to think about what you've done. His face screws up and he mouths the word, what? Before his eyes shock open. His mouth slackens and he looks down at his chest. My arm is buried elbow deep inside his viscera, my fingernails digging into his heart. Blood drips from his lips as he looks back to me. This is the best part, when they know they're had. Their hearts always pound so hard, as if this organ can physically crawl out of their chests. That succulent, brief moment of dawning mortality. Pushing a knee up under his gut, I shove him off me. As he falls backward, I jerk my arm forward, and his heart does physically bloom from his chest, clutched inside my fist. It sounds like sickly little puckers, like when mud sucks at your shoes, but more primal than that. The smell of copper fills the air, and my eyes glint in the darkness in the way no human's eyes ever have. Bud gets one last look at his heart, crushed in my fist, before he falls back against the seat, and, as my eyes shine, the light leaves his. I lick my lips and sit up. The first bite of that delicious heart, blood squirts down my chin, and it's more than divine. Little bits of torn arteries and ragged flesh dribble onto my bare chest. I let out a moan of pleasure and my eyes flutter closed. No matter how many times I've fed, this taste never gets old. The cruelty that poisons their souls flavors their hearts, and I savor each bite of slick, hot meat. When I'm done, I strip and clean myself in the river. Bud's blood spreads in the water like the dancing plumes of sunset clouds. My jeans are a ruinous stain, but I chose this place for a reason. My motel is just across the river. As I approach my room, heavy drum beats fill the silence. Right, the round dance. The school isn't far. Nothing is far from each other in this town. My mouth twitches up into a crooked smile. What the hell? It's been ages since I've danced. Showered and in fresh clothes, I drop the garbage sack containing the evidence of my feast into a dumpster on my way to the high school. I don't fear police, but they can be inconvenient, so a little discretion is a good idea. When I pull open the metal doors to the gymnasium, men's voices lift in a throaty arc of song. We're on Muskogee land here, and they sing for the ancestors in a way that has warmth spreading through my gut. I tuck my hands in my back pockets and stroll toward the center, where people are dancing. Old women, little boys, everyone in between, they whirl and stomp and raise hands in celebration. I'm watching them when I feel a presence next to me. Thanks for the recommendation, I say, knowing it's Joe before he speaks. I don't turn and look at him, but I can still feel his surprise. I can't believe you left the bar. I let Tommy take over. He clears his throat and puts his hands in his jean pockets, somehow making him look awkward and unsure. I'm glad you're here. I worry about you. Now I look at him and my smile is genuine. Worry about me? Yeah, at the bar, anyway, I just don't want you getting hurt. His eyes are on the dancers too, and I notice his sadness is a little more profound. Joe lost his wife 5 years ago and hasn't even looked at another woman since. This is something else I know. Dance with me, Joe, I say, laying a hand on his arm. It takes some cajoling, but eventually he joins me in the middle of the room. My boots, with their hoof trim, tap against the polished floor of the gymnasium, and Joe spins me around and around. He starts to laugh. We are whirling dervishes on that shiny floor, hooking arms and our feet high-stepping in a matched pattern. We dance, and I know I should be careful. Joe is just a man. I can't take him too far past exhaustion. The drummers stop for a break, and the singers' voices fade. Joe collapses in a folding chair and runs a hand through his dark hair. I haven't danced like that since, but I'm already leaving. The night air feels cool against my flesh skin. I'm not headed for the motel. It's time to leave, and I'm walking toward the main highway outside of town. Frantic footsteps pound behind me, and then I hear Joe cry, "Wait!" I turn to face him, and he says, "Aren't you gonna stay?" Not this time. But he looks down at my feet, at the perfect trail of deer tracks that I've left in the dirt. He catches his breath as he looks back to my face. "The drum stopped," he whispers. I nod. It's my time to go. His chest heaves, and he stares at me like he's screwing up his courage. "Are you? Those men, are you?" Fear and wonder chase each other across his face. "Dear woman?" I put my finger to my lips and make a shushing sound. "Consider this a sign, Joe Langdon. You will love again. I promise." I wink at him and then turn my back and resume walking down the dimly lit road. This time, Joe doesn't follow. I leave my perfect deer tracks in the dust as I disappear into the darkness. Like I said, I love these boots. They're my signature look.
All right, that was awesome. So
Thank you.
thank you so much. My dad said through my mom that hearts are high in cholesterol. I don't believe it though. I think that's just his heart. So all right, so I'm going to add Jeffy. So, and you are the SUFWA president. So how long are you committed to this role?
Oh, my first term is up at the end of June, but I've agreed to run for a second 2-year term. So I'll
Woohoo!
probably be up for another couple years unless they vote me out.
Okay, well, sounds cool. Yeah, so I mean, I check your feed all the time. I can see you're pretty busy cranking out the books.
It's true. It's true. Gotta keep the lights on, pay the mortgage, all of that.
Okay. All right. Well, what are you reading for us tonight?
I'm going to read from my stuff isn't nearly as much horror as the previous two people, but I'm going to read from the third book in my dark fantasy romance trilogy, Bonds of Magic. This is from Gray Magic, and it's kind of an ending scene, but I thought it fit the love kills theme.
All right.
So
Awesome.
this is the rescue scene near the end. And this is a novel, so we're starting, as I say, near the end. Nick paced the round tower room, which was crazy making, but better than sitting still and repeatedly poking at herself mentally in a futile effort to determine if her sanity was eroding yet. She'd gone longer than this before without having her magic tapped, so there really shouldn't be any corrosive effect yet. Maybe she was feeling the pressure of her magic so much because she'd been using it with Gabriel more than ever before in her life. More likely, she only thought it was building to boiling due to the galling combination of utter boredom and low-level terror. She had no time, she had way too much time to think about it, days, though she wasn't sure how many, and way too little to do with her energy, except pace and fret. On the upside, smarmy Sergio hadn't been back to pester her, neither had her father. The downside of them leaving her alone was that she worried about what they were up to. Were they laying a trap for Gabriel, if he was even awake? Had they gone to Housefell in force, even now everyone there was dead? Had her father used the information she'd given him to take over the Arcanium? Pausing in her pacing, she slammed the meat of her fists against the stone wall, growling her frustration. Never had she felt so impotent to affect her fate, to save the people who meant everything to her. Though she knew she only harmed herself, she beat on the wall, venting despair in incoherent half screams, stopping short of banging her head against it because that would really hurt. Giving up on her tantrums, she slid down the wall, giving in to tears. She'd been good about not letting herself cry, mostly because if her father or Sergio did suddenly turn up, she didn't want them to see the evidence that they were making progress on breaking her. If the untapped magic didn't make her crazy, the boredom, isolation, and despair would. But for the regularly delivered, bland beyond description meals, she'd worried that they'd left her there to die. They won't do that, though, will they? She muttered to the baby, the silent life inside her. At least then she could pretend she wasn't talking to herself. Oh, no, we're much too valuable. We've always been kept in a cage by them. This one is just far more tangible. Giving in, she banged her head back against the wall. Ow. Bashing her head against stone walls was as futile and painful as she had known without trying. Gabriel was the one who tried anyway. Scrubbing the tears away, she tried to think for the millionth time of way out of this predicament. Maybe it wasn't too late to save Gabriel and everyone in Housefell. If she could just warn them, then maybe this was getting her nowhere. Instead, she let herself dwell in some memories of Gabriel. He'd been the first person in her life who hadn't wanted to cage her, intangibly or otherwise. He was the best thing that had ever happened to her, and keeping their child alive was the only reason she wasn't considering suicide to escape the terrible fate that awaited her. Maybe after the baby was born, if she could keep a small corner of her will, she could find a way to finally escape her cage. Firmly setting aside the invidious temptation of that last resort, sitting crumpled and listless against the unyielding wall, she let herself sink into happy memories. Gabriel's black eyes filled with humor and warm affection, his hair like moonlight, save for the single streak that matched his dark eyes, his magic curling around her, silvery cool, moon bright, a balm for all the aching, empty pits inside her. She imagined she could sense him, his loving presence, the sensual caress of his hands, the firm embrace, his voice promising to protect her always. Her own magic leapt to him eagerly, flowing in a rush like an undammed river, churning when it met the wall of her channels. I love you, Nick, he whispered in her mind. She caught her breath on a sob. I love you, Gabriel, always. Will you share your magic with me? Take, have. She was weeping freely as she repeated the refrain, remembering how she'd first tantalized him with it and how it had become a declaration of deepest love. She would give him everything of herself if only he would live. She almost believed she could feel his magic strengthening around her, silver chains of moonlight under her skin, the refreshingly cool water that formed his silent core. And she reached for him in longing, pushing her magic toward him. More, please, just like that. Letting out a watery laugh because it felt so good to imagine that rapport with him again. She opened all those channels she'd been working so hard to keep closed, and it felt like unclenching a muscle grown tight with strain. The floodgates opened and she poured her magic and love into Gabriel, giving him every last fiery bit of herself, imagining sending him a shower of blood-red rose petals. And he drank her in, his magic flowing into and around her, embracing and enveloping her in a bubble of fiercely protective love. She had the sudden urge to lie down and cover her head. Probably she had lost her mind, but this was so much better than sanity. So she allowed herself to sag into the hard cradle of wall and floor, curving her body into it, pressing her face into her hands so that all the world faded away and nothing remained but the sacred flow of her magic and his, freely exchanged in purest love. So comforting was this imaginary embrace that she didn't even startle when the roof came off. Meditation wasn't Gabriel's strong suit, so though he started out in a seated pose trying to ignore the outside world, he ended up standing just inside the verge of the forest where the smaller saplings met the open meadow, House Samael towering above in all its malevolent grandeur. With Sally's hand clasped in his, coolly fresh as water from a hidden spring, huge and bright as a full moon just touching the horizon, he reached for one of those towers, seeking the bloom of rosy fire that was his beloved. Elise stood nearby, Han behind her with his hands on her shoulders, ready to defend them against attack. And Jadrin flanked their other side, sword in one hand and machete in the other, as he shifted from foot to foot restlessly. Even if you reach her, you can't access her magic without touching her, he argued, not for the first time either. Another reason quiet meditation hadn't been an option. Gabriel ignored the argument, not for the first time, and extended his senses toward Nick. She was there, hot and bright as midsummer sunshine, bursting with magic, frustration, and despair. Oh, Nick. His heart bleeding for her, he sent all his love, wanting to wrap her up in it. She responded to him ardently, as she always did, her magic and love full of scarlet passion. He imagined asking her to share her magic, and she laughed that he asked. Take, have. It poured into him like a draught of the most potent wine conceivable. If wine could be made from roses, it would taste and feel like this. Gloriously inebriating, deeply nurturing. Beside him, Sally gasped. What? Jadrin demanded. What's happening? Shh! Elise hushed him sharply. Gabriel laughed, a breath of air giddy with the flush of Nick's magic. She was there, alive and well, sensually overpowering. He groaned his pleasure, the perfection of the exchange feeling as if he had sunk into the hot embrace of her body, shuddering with need only she could satiate. Just like that, he murmured. Hoping she understood, he urged her to take cover. Then, taking the bountiful magic she'd supplied, he pulled moonlight into hooks, digging them into the eaves of the slate roof capping the tower, then pulled. Dark arts, take me, Jadrin yelped as the roof spun up and then crashed into the crevasse below. To be fair, all the others, even Sally, who'd felt him do it, exclaimed in astonishment. Gabriel smiled in grim satisfaction, tightening his hold on Nick, reassuring himself that she was whole and well. That's all well and good, Jadra declared, sounding as if it were anything but, though a faintness in his voice showed he was impressed by the feat. Now what? Are we going to fly over there and haul her out? No, Gabriel answered, finding the silver threads that wove back and forth between them. She is going to fly out. Nick gazed in bewilderment at the open sky above, gray clouds scudding in a high wind. Apparently, her insanity had progressed further than she'd guessed, though did insane people know they were crazy? Leading her into illusions of freedom along with the wish fulfillment of feeling Gabriel's magic intertwined with hers. Getting to her feet, she nevertheless gulped great lungfuls of fresh air, the chill bracing after the cloistered air of the tower. For an illusion created by her own longings, it was surprisingly realistic. It even felt like her blood brightened, her system energized by the sight of the world beyond her dismal prison. Silvery moon magic sang along her nerves, and cool water coursed through her bloodstream, Gabriel's essence running along her skin with sensual caresses. As in the arcanium, the silver threads he'd embedded in her with erotic precision glowed just beneath her skin, tightening in a web that she barely managed a gasp of astonishment before she morphed into her alternate form. The room suddenly looked much smaller, the bland curving walls taking on strange new dimensions, and the sky, oh, the sky called to her. Fly, fly to me, my heart. Gabriel was here. No one else could have pushed her into alternate form, unless this was all a dream. Well, if so, then she was going to fly in her dreams. They would give her the escape she craved. Though she'd never actually flown, a dream would be a wonderful place to try it out. She spread her wings, the sensitive feather tips brushing the walls on either side, and pumped down. And Crow hopped a minute bit into the air before landing with a thud. Dreams were not supposed to be this realistic. Maybe it was simply another depressing nightmare. Fly, I know you can. You are not real, she crossly informed the sense of Gabriel. Maybe they were both dead and they were struggling through some sort of purgatory of the afterlife, like an old tale where the lovers struggle to find each other. As with all of those tales, it seemed living it wasn't nearly so swooningly romantic. It was just a miserable slog. Her keen hearing picked up the sound of boots on the tower stairs, soldiers calling to each other in excited tones. Maybe some of this was real and the roof had blown off, attracting attention from her captors, in which case the Iblis lock on the door clicked open. In which case this was her one chance at escape. Summoning all the spine and determination she possessed, she launched herself to the top of the wall, talons digging in as she bobbled there. The drop below was precipitous and terrifyingly deep, made all the more alarming by her acute long vision. She could actually see the sharp rocks far below at the bottom of the crag. Her avian brain assessed the distance with brutal clarity. If she didn't manage to take wing, the fall would kill her. Stop! A Samael wizard shrieked, while another hit her with a dose of nerve-frying pain. Of course, if she stayed, she'd just wish she were dead. Better to reach than fail for not trying. She took the leap and fell through the air. The group at the forest's verge exclaimed as one. Even Gabriel, who'd felt Nick become the Silver Phoenix, who'd been viscerally connected to her as she wondered at the change and decided to try. He'd seen the dizzying drop through her eyes and feared along with her, felt her pain as the Samael wizards tried to immobilize her. He both watched and felt her fall from the tower, his stomach dropping as they shared the exhilarating terror and wild hope, the wizard's magic quickly shredding as she escaped their field of power. Fly, he urged her, sending magic into her through the silver web they shared. Fly! Elise wailed, clapping her hands over her mouth as the distant silver bird plummeted into the abyss, then choked on a gasp when Nick popped into sight again. They all broke into cheers, even Jadran, and Gabriel's spirit soared exultant along with her, the beat of her wings his own, the thundering of her great heart pounding through him. Unerringly, she arrowed toward him, crossing the distance at amazing speed. Incoming, Elise shouted as a group of aerial spirits condensed to hound Nick, and she jogged in the air, distressed, her flight faltering. Help, Elise, Gabriel asked Sally, who was already moving to join Han in feeding magic to Elise. The spirits harrying Nick peeled away, attacked in turn, and she shot toward him again. Now that Gabriel was connected to Nick once more, her fiery magic billowing into him with all her generosity of spirit, wine red, rose warm, he no longer needed anyone else. Nick filled him as no one else could, shoring up those lingering weaknesses left by the struggle to save Sully, bringing him singingly alive. Nick drew closer, skimming low over the meadow, Elise's wizardry battling the pursuing spirits. Jadrin had joined the knot around Elise, offering terse advice. Gabriel couldn't tell if it was helpful or not, but he focused on Nick. He ran out of the sheltering saplings as she landed, her wings flapping furiously, dirt and winter-cured plants kicking up in a rooster-tail wake. The moment she halted, he yanked on the thread, still running toward her, bringing her back to human form moments before she flung herself into his embrace. They stood there, sealed together, shuddering, laughing, and weeping as one, and he buried his face in her silky black curls, savoring being able to touch her again. My heart, he chanted over and over, feeling indeed as if his heart had been restored, filling the gaping, agonizing hole left by her absence. She pulled back enough to crane her head back, extracting her hands to frame his face in her palms. You're alive, she breathed, aren't you? This is real, I hope. More real than anything else in the world, he promised, dropping his mouth to hers. Lush, heated, richer than the finest wine, her mouth open to him, her magic flowing into him and his back into her in a cycle old as time. Jadrin dragged them back, literally, grabbing them both by the shoulders and yanking them toward the dubious cover of the forest. Dark arts save me from the stupidity of true love, he snarled. We're not out of trouble yet. I'm
All
going to stop
right.
there.
Okay, sounds good. So let's see. I've got you, Jeffy. I've got KB. Jessica might have had a Wi-Fi snafu. But anyway, I mean, it's a very different turn from the starting off with serial killers on blind dates to, the sort of like undying love kind of situation, only not with vampires. But, that would have actually probably been a good parallel for what we started with. But yeah, this is a good antidote to that. So thank you, Jeffy.
You're welcome.
Yeah, so let's see. Well, I guess kind of wrapping things up for this evening. But I don't know. Does anybody else have anything they want to share before we end things?
I'd just say that was a great last line. I loved it. The stupidity of true love. That was wonderful.
Thanks.
Yeah.
That was why I picked it, was to end on that line.
Yeah. Yeah, and Jessica's boots that she was writing about were amazing. I'm like, where do you get a pair of those?
Yeah, absolutely, right? We all need those.
So powerful.
Yeah. Well, so yeah, I mean, they were all great stories, and that was definitely a much more positive, note to end on. So I might not have nightmares now. Maybe not. But yeah, thank you ladies so much for being here tonight and for, spending some time with me and sharing your stories with everybody. And yeah, Jeffy, good luck with re-election. I'm sure
Oh, thanks.
that you will not be voted out, but I don't have any say. It's I don't know. Yeah, thank you so much. All right. So that is our show for tonight. And we will be back the third Friday of March, which let's see. I am so sorry. It has been a long week. But that looks like that would put us at March 17th. So, yeah, I mean, if you know anyone who's interested in reading on here, it's a approximately 20-minute slot. We do mostly fiction, but every now and then, like if you have poetry or creative nonfiction that you feel like might be a fit, just go ahead and give me a PM or send me an email at amystorieslive@gmail.com. But otherwise, yeah, I will see everybody back here in March. Thank you so much and have a good weekend.